On the 30th of January 1946, a German general was brought out alongside a number of other condemned war criminals to the gallows in Minsk, and he was executed in front of a crowd of 100,000 people. Gottfried von Ermannsdorff was a 52-year-old general of Hitler's army, and he was a man who had a rather long military career. He served during the First World War and throughout the Second World War on the Eastern Front, and saw action in many different countries and lands. But what is the story of his execution? Join us today as we look at the justified execution of the German general of Minsk, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Gottfried von Ermannsdorff was born in April 1893, and he would serve in the German military for most of his life. He was part of the German forces during the First World War, and following the restrictions imposed upon the country after their loss in the Treaty of Versailles, Ermannsdorff remained part of the army. He was amongst the 100,000 military soldiers that made up the Reichswehr, but as Hitler seized control, he would expand the German army and the military. But von Ermannsdorff would then be involved as soon as the Second World War broke out, and he fought during the invasion of Poland and the battles of Belgium and then France. Quickly, the German army seized control of these nations, forcing millions of people under German occupation. He would be a very decorated soldier, and was awarded the Knight's Cross when he was a colonel in March 1942. The citation stated that he was awarded this because the independent decision of Oberst von Ermannsdorff to break through in an easterly direction on the 21st of January 1942, and the successful prosecution of this operation through to the 25th of January 1942, would subsequently be of massive importance for the overall course of the combat. It was only with the help of Gruppen von Ermannsdorff, consisting of 4 infantry battalion, 1 machine gun, and 1 pioneer battalion, and a light artillery battalion, that a defensive front could be built up west of Bolkov. If this had been broken through, then it most likely would have required a costly attack to retake the salient position. But he was decorated for his work on the Eastern Front. When the Nazis launched Operation Barbarossa, it took many people by surprise. Even Stalin did not anticipate that the German army would rampage into the Soviet Union after they broke the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The fighting on this front was brutal and barbaric, and millions would lose their lives in battles such as Stalingrad and Kursk, and the fighting was very ferocious. As the German army would advance and move forward, they would be followed by mobile execution squads who would slaughter and execute many civilians, including women and children. Gottfried von Ermannsdorff was promoted to the rank of General Major, and on the Eastern Front, he would be involved in fighting the Red Army, and especially during the aftermath of the Battle of Stalingrad. On the 27th of June 1944, Soviet Red Army soldiers advanced forward and pushed towards Mogilev, and specifically to the north of the city, and they crossed the Dnieper River over a bridge. But the German Fourth Army had sent a message to General Ermannsdorff that Mogilev was to be held as a fortified position, and it was ordered that the Germans would fight until the very last man. They were digging in heavily against the Soviets, and the 4th Army would then retreat to the 39th Panzer Corps and the 12th Army Corps, who were around 20 kilometres west of Mogilev. This left the city to its fate, and it would be overwhelmingly attacked by the Soviets in devastating waves. General Ermannsdorff had been pretty much abandoned to be captured by the Soviets or killed, and along with his soldiers he was on his own in Mogilev. He reported to the military hierarchy that evening that the Soviets were on the edge of the city, and that his men had been weakened, and that they were suffering from heavy losses. But then 3 hours later he said the only part of the city under his control was the city centre, and that brutal hand-to-hand fighting was now taking place between the remaining German soldiers and the Red Army, and the last message sent from his headquarters came at 11 p.m. that night. It was sent by another commanding officer, requesting that a captain was decorated with the oak leaves of the Knight Cross for his bravery. But with this, in the defence of Fortress Mogilev, General Gottfried von Ermannsdorff was captured by the Soviet Red Army. His headquarters had been overwhelmed, and he was then seized rather than being executed on the spot, as he was of such a high rank. He was interrogated for information, but was then left to rot in a tough Soviet prison camp until 1946, when he was then brought to trial in Minsk. The Minsk trials occurred as a way of punishing those captured senior German officers and other criminals who had been seized in Belarus and in the surrounding areas. Alongside von Ermannsdorff on trial was Johann Georg Rickert, another Wehrmacht general, and Eberhard Herf, a general in the Order Police of Minsk. There were 18 defendants, and these were men who were accused of crimes against humanity in the region, which included mass execution, deportation, and the burning down of villages and houses. General von Ermannsdorff was condemned on charges of deporting 10,000 people in the Soviet Union, who were then sent to extermination or concentration camps, where they were then slaughtered. He was also accused of destroying villages, schools and churches, as well as executing and shooting disabled people during the creation of fortifications. When defending Mogilev, he was also accused of encouraging his soldiers to use civilians as human shields, resulting in innocent loss of life, and also in organising reprisal against civilians. These were people who were accused of helping partisans and the underground activities against the German army. He was also charged with establishing camps in which many people were sent to, where they were kept in terrible conditions, where they contracted diseases and then died. But he was then sentenced to death for all of these charges, and was briefly held that evening inside of a prison, before his execution would be then performed the next day, after he was condemned alongside the other men. On the 30th of January 1946, in front of a crowd of over 100,000 civilians, and people who had flocked to the centre of Minsk to witness the executions of the German war criminals, General von Ermannsdorff was brought out to his execution. The people of Minsk had suffered heavily during the war, as many of them were deported, and they had lost family members and friends through execution and slaughter at the hands of the German army. So because of this, they wanted to see some reprisal for the horror that they had been forced to live through. There was a large gallows set up in the middle of the horse racing venue in Minsk, and von Ermannsdorff was led to the gallows when he was then placed on a platform. The executioner approached him and the other condemned men, and then placed the nooses around their necks, and then the death sentence was read out and proclaimed, and the crowd were forced to hear what General von Ermannsdorff's crimes were, before the platform was then removed under the German general, and because of this, Gottfried von Ermannsdorff was left hanging, and he was executed in front of the absolutely huge crowd. General von Ermannsdorff was an experienced military leader and commander, and he had seen action in many different countries during the First and Second World War. He had led soldiers during the battles for Belgium and France, and was very highly decorated, but his final stand would take place inside of a city in Belarus, where he was fighting against the fierce Soviet Red Army. The Red Army would overwhelm the Germans and would liberate the city, and in this the general was captured and he was then sentenced to death after being accused of a huge number of crimes during the Second World War. His actions led to the slaughter of civilians, and with this, he was executed. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.